Clap one on three. One, two, three. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
I don't, don't want to get into what we're going to get into.
Look, folks, as we've talked about many times on this podcast,
Yeah.
over time, there are characters that live in our world. There are certain people, Jack Black,
Ah, bless.
Keanu. There's people that we talk about on this podcast as though we know them.
Yeah.
And from time to time, when stuff happens with one of our beloved characters, we got to address it. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's I think everybody at this point is already shouting it at their speaker. They know what I'm about to say.
They do.
And
They
what
do.
I'm about to say is that this week, Dave Grohl announced that he has had a baby outside of his marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We know that you know that that's what we're going to bring up because so many of you have reached out to us about this, which I love, by the way. I love that, again, if something happens with Dave Grohl, we're
Yep.
on your speed dial and we
Yeah.
appreciate yous.
There's a very select amount of characters that if they hear
Yeah.
about those characters, they're
Yep.
going to be like, they need to know immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But listen, it's what a wild ride. What a wild reveal.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I just, oh God, I have so many thoughts and none of them are positive.
Yeah.
It's just, I understand that he is a person that we don't know him as a person.
Right.
And I understand that he is a celebrity. Uh, so of course we don't know the real him, but it felt like we did. He felt like a really solid dude and one of those kind of guys where you're like, the whole is there a guy that you would feel safe in a room with?
Right.
And it's like, oh, him. I think he's such pure of heart and such a seemingly lovely person. And then to find out that he is, who knows how long it was going on, but that he stepped out on his wife and had a baby.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, I have to also go on record as saying, like, nobody who is famous owes us anything.
Sure.
Their private lives are their business.
Sure.
Obviously, he felt like he needed to put this out there. So it is up for public consumption at that point. Do
Yeah.
I think that we are owed that as the public? No. Do I think it's messed up that, like, somebody has to share those things if they feel like maybe they don't want to? Yeah, I do think that's messed up. But here's the bottom line. He put it out there.
He
It's in the
did.
news.
He did.
He's put it out, so therefore I just feel like people who are commenting that it's like, we shouldn't be talking about this, whatever. It's like, well, he did put it out there. Again, do
He
I think that
started
it's
it.
right? And do I
Yeah.
think that it's right that he felt he had to do that? No, but then we can't and that's a bigger conversation about the, politics of fame and all of and society and all of those things. And listen, we don't have the time. Um, but I think, because then the next piece of conversation I keep hearing people talk about is that it's like, are you really surprised he cheated on his wife? Like, he is a rock star. Like, this, he lost his best friend a couple of years ago. Like, maybe he's been, like, making bad choices. There's also, of course, the conversation that perhaps she knew that he was having relations with other people, that there's, of course, a world in which they could have had a deal of some kind, and that's their business and their business alone.
Sure.
However, the bottom line is this. Nobody who is in that kind of situation is also, I'm assuming, gonna feel cool when you impregnate the other person that you're having relations with. And
Yeah.
I have to just say two things, and I'll try and keep this succinct. One, for as long as I live, till the day that I die, when I tell you the one mystery that haunts me in life, and I mean that I truly can't wrap my head around, is the concept of having sex outside your marriage and not using a condom.
Yeah.
Because pregnancy is preventable. And I
Yeah.
understand things happen and there could be a situation where you took the precautions and it didn't work out. I get that. But you hear the stories of people who do cheat, and I'm talking about this I have apply to him regardless of whether or not he was cheating or she was knowing about it, because again, I'm like, especially if you're cheating though, like, you gotta know that you're not bringing a disease back to your wife. Like, that's one of the big
Yeah.
pieces for me. It's not only the pregnancy. I'm like, if you're gonna cheat, wear a condom. I don't know. Maybe just go for some mouth or hand stuff. Like, do you have to go all the do you have to do the full thing? Like to me, it's just like, and I understand people could then say, well, people are make bad decisions or whatever. Okay. I just think it happens a lot to the point that I'm going like, just if you're gonna do it, save your partner that.
Yeah.
I beg you.
And
And
I
then the other point I want to make
yeah,
that no one I've heard talk about is, of course, this is devastating. He said in his post that it's like, I'm trying to earn back the trust of my wife and children.
sure.
The one thing that no one has added to this conversation yet is that baby. And I'm going to just go for it. And I'm
Sure.
going to tell you what I really think.
Good. I
That
love that.
baby has been set up to fail. And I don't care what humans think, because humans have this great way of going, I'll just love the baby so much that the baby will be fine. I'll just love the baby. I'll be in the baby's life and I'll love the baby and the baby will be fine. That's not how it works, folks. And you can love all day long, 365 a year. It's not going to change the fact that that child is going to grow up knowing that her existence blew up a family, that her existence also blew up the internet. They
Oh,
can
yeah.
shield her from it for whatever amount of time. But guess what? There's a reason your dad doesn't live with you and never did. And this is because this is the situation. And I'm sorry, but the kind of burden that mentally and emotionally puts on a human is insurmountable.
Yeah.
It is asking of this human to have to exist in a way that is so fucking unfair.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, again, like, I feel for his family, absolutely. And I really feel for that baby, because again, I'm like, what is that life going to feel like when you figure it out? They can shield her for a certain amount of time. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I'm not saying, "Hey, throw in the towel. Don't bother loving her because it won't matter." That's not what I'm saying, obviously. I'm just saying I think we as humans think that it's like, I can love this kid so much that whatever bad position I've kind of put them into, it won't affect them. Bullshit. Wrong.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's only a matter of time before someone reveals who this woman is, the
Yes.
girlfriend, baby mama, whatever we're going to call her. Um, and even if that somehow never comes out, which I would be shocked if it didn't, even then, like at some point, if that child's growing up knowing their father is Dave Grohl, uh, like, I mean, Google your dad at some point and, oh, this is absolutely going to come up. And then you'll be like, oh, that's horrifying. And who knows, like, is he going to try and like be very public and like posting pictures of him and this child? I don't even know. I can't imagine what this is doing to his wife. I can't imagine what this is doing to his daughters and how his daughters are now maybe viewing men in a slightly different way than what they might
Yeah.
have been prior.
Yeah.
The whole thing, um, uh, the Facebook fan page was having like a very deep discussion about this whole thing and all the shock we were all feeling. Um, and True Crew member Karina said a quote that I was like, she's they've nailed it. They've absolutely nailed it. How it feels. She said, quote, I feel like he cheated on all of us. And I same, absolutely same. I feel let down. I
Yeah.
can't even begin to imagine what his family is actually feeling, but I feel so let down
Yeah.
and just disappointed. And the I just keep like my head is like replaying over and over Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek with the oh my god, ew, David. Like that just constantly over and over in my head because I just can't believe. Again, I know he's a celebrity, he's his own person. I shouldn't put that much faith and trust in a person I don't even know. But it's like, oh, but he made us feel he knew him.
Well,
And
he's
find
so
out he did.
beloved, right? Like he's been this
Yeah.
like, he's had such a career. He's experienced so much loss. He's so talented. And you always are seeing the photos of him out like doing the charity work, cooking the barbecue for people
Yeah.
and um yeah, I feel like he's just such a beloved like he's I mean, listen, I feel like that's like a part of why people love him so much, right? Is that it's like he feels like he has felt like he is this like genuine, we want to believe has certain kind of moral type person, especially a
Yeah.
man who's 52, like it's like, yeah, we get it. Like you're in your 20s, you're in your 30s and you're in a band like and it's that famous. Like I don't want to think about the stuff that happens. I mean, if you read Motley Crue's book, they get into some things that
Oh,
I'll
nope.
never unremember and I wish I could. Like
Hmm.
again, like no one is suggesting that it's like I think there's just this feeling of like, really? Now you're 52 and you didn't think maybe I should pull out? You're
Oh, I'm
52 and you didn't think maybe I should wear a condom? You're 52? Like for me it's like I just will never be able to wrap my head around that as a concept.
yeah. I mean, it's just like uh yeah. I mean, yeah, I can't even begin to think about I'll say people. I was going to say guys, but just overall people in bands and what happens with super famous bands and other I can't think about it. I'm not giving them a pass for, cheating on partners because I just feel like it's so easy not to.
Yeah. It is a choice, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, it when I got the news, I was pretty much on my couch for the rest of the day because I was like, I can't move anywhere else. This just feels like it was a gut punch that I didn't like. Not that anybody likes a gut punch. Um, but yeah, this I am surprised he went so public with it. I assume somebody was going to go public with it and he was like I should be first. They should hear it from me first before whatever and
He wanted to get ahead of it for sure.
yeah. And look, to anybody that's like, "Oh, it's not his fault. He was grieving, whatever." Mhm. Mhm. Um I'm not saying he didn't and isn't still currently going through unimaginable loss, but that's not an excuse to to cheat on your wife like a year later.
Yeah.
It's just
I don't think there's ever an excuse.
there's
That's the
not.
thing, right? Like
There's
it's like
not.
and again, if we want to believe that they had some sort of understanding, that's fine too, which by the way also we have nothing people are speculating about that. Like there's no way to know.
Sure.
So, but even if they did, I think it's fair to assume the children didn't know about their sexual
Oh,
deal, right?
sure.
Like it's blindsiding for them. And again, I'm certain that any wife who's like, "Hey man, yeah, do your thing, whatever," is probably following that up by saying, "Just don't embarrass me.
Yeah, be careful.
Be discreet, be careful." So that's the thing. It's like it's to me it's just wild. It just feels wild to me that it's like you could put yourself in the position where that could happen.
Oh, yeah. Again, you're not a guy in his 20s who doesn't know any better.
No.
Mm.
It's just yeah, it's sad. It's sad. Listen, if something comes out now about Keanu or Paul Rudd or Jack Black, like, just know everybody, like, we might have to take a week off. Like, I don't know. Like, it just feels like faith
Mm.
in,
We've been shook.
we're shooketh.
Yeah. Our faith has been shooketh in one of the like handful of pure souls. We're shook.
We're shook.
We're shook. But I'm here to help us unshook. Now, I knew this was going to come up because there's no way we weren't going to talk about it. And then I was like, God, that's going to just feel so depressing to talk about. We should have something like light and fun that we can talk about to bring us out of this. So what's more bright and fun than just random fun facts?
What I like is that we have a true crime podcast, and you're like, "I'm worried we're gonna be a bit of a bum out. Better find something fun to talk about."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also love, yeah, of all the things we've ever discussed on this show, I'm like, one of our idols getting caught cheating is the darkest thing we've ever talked about.
We're
And I
about to
need,
do an episode that's entitled "The Severed Head," and it's like, look, we're really sorry about that Dave Grohl bum out. That's sorry about the darkness of Dave Grohl having a baby out of his
yeah,
marriage.
I think part of it is we don't normally go dark in the banter.
Sure, yes, that's true.
Usually the
Yeah, yeah,
banter
yeah.
is like light and bubbly or whatever it is. And then we save the dark stuff for the case. But yeah, look, I felt the need. I found so many facts that some of them are just interesting to me.
Okay.
But I found so many, we're not going to get to all of them, is
Well,
the
here's
point.
my question. Is
Yeah.
is there a theme for these fun facts or a topic, or this is just potpourri?
Oh, potpourri.
Oh, fantastic.
For sure. I was gonna put it in categories, and then I was like, "No, just let them, let them feel them as they come."
Let them
I'm
feel them. This is amazing.
I'm I'm also now slightly embarrassed that this was what I've chosen to do,
I
because
don't
now
want you to feel them.
I'm too deep in it. I
I don't
can't
want
get
you to
out of
feel
this.
embarrassed at all. I think
I
it's
can't back out.
glorious.
I can't back out because 'cause we'd have so much editing to do so that we never had to talk about it ever again. But, it's too late. Here I am, brightening spirits.
It's beautiful.
Um
What a gift to our lives.
And look, if nothing else, it might even if it doesn't brighten your spirit, I bet there's at least one thing in here that's gonna make you go, "I didn't know that."
You're
And
gonna
that's
learn something. That's the Christy Oxborrow promise.
yeah, yeah, I'm trying to teach something. I don't know. Um, oh god, I really went on a tear. I'm gonna have to narrow these down. Um, Pineapples take 2 to 3 years to grow.
Wow.
Which doesn't feel like a great, I mean, that just feels like an insanely long time. Doesn't matter. Point is, again, proving that this is all over the place. As a teenager, Queen Elizabeth II was trained as a mechanic. I mean, where are you gonna get a podcast that's gonna talk about the fucking queen and pineapples in the span of 2 minutes? The answer
Oh,
is nowhere else. So if you were looking for royalty pineapple talk, you've come to the right place.
I love
Here's
it.
one. Come on. Here's this. This is fun. I've never felt older trying to talk to like a hip teenager or something to be like, this is cool. This is cool. How about this? I've got this. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Fred Astaire took up skateboarding in his 70s.
What?
Like that feels I also the ones that made me go, "No way." I did fact check. Some of them I was like, "That feels right." Um, here you go. Speaking of things you're learning, that little blob of toothpaste that you put on your toothbrush when you're brushing your teeth, that little blob of toothpaste is called a nurdle.
Stop.
Why? Why are we doing this? But also, why does it need a name? It in the tube, out the tube. It's toothpaste. It doesn't need a name. The naming people have gone too far. Doesn't matter.
Nerdle, nerdle.
Thank you so much. In the 1830s, they thought ketchup was a medicine and they used it to treat indigestion.
Look, I'm not mad at that.
I'm fascinated to know what 1830s ketchup is like. Oh, here's a fun one for you. Never felt older. In 1947, Bing Crosby had to re-record the song White Christmas because the original wore out from being pressed too many times.
Oh, that's wild.
The original was 1942. So in 5 years, they wore that thing down so bad he had to re-record it.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's fun. Speaking of fun and names that why is that a thing? The real name for a hashtag is an octothorpe. Look, I'm just blowing minds and educating all over the place.
I love it.
Oh God, I took a real variety. I can't even. King Henry, because I know you're not done with royalty. King Henry VIII of England had servants that he called grooms of stool. And their sole job was to wipe the king's ass. Been fun. Oh God. Nutmeg is a hallucinogen. Yeah. If you have enough, apparently, wild time.
Wow.
Oh God, what's something else fun? Since 1945, all British tanks are equipped to make tea. There is something inside the tank so you can make tea. I've never been more in love with the Brits. Between 1912 and 1952, Olympic medals were given for music, sculpture, painting, and architecture. I mean, Olympic medals for art. I don't know why that fascinated me, but
No, that is
it is what
fascinating.
it is. It is what it is. The chocolate bar Three Musketeers.
I'm a fan.
Apparently, it was created in 1932. And when it was first released, it was available in 3 different flavors:
What were the flavors?
chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry.
What?
They had to pull back during, I think, like World War II or something like that, due to like things were being rationed and they couldn't get all the supplies they needed for every flavor. So they had to pull back. And I
Question.
assume just continue with the chocolate.
Well, my question is this:
Yeah.
are we talking like not only the filling but the coating, or are we talking just that sweet, puffy dream nougat or whatever it is in there?
That's a great question. I assume the nougat, but I don't know. Great question. Only a few more, don't worry. Although I guess I could also be saying I should I instead of saying don't worry, I should say more like I'm so sorry, but there's only a few more left.
Yep.
I should look at it that way.
Refocus the lens. Yep.
100%. God, I'm so fucking all over the place. I can't even stand myself. I just can't believe that I'm about to say what I'm going to say. Owls don't have eyeballs.
Have.
They're this makes it sound worse. But apparently they're eye tubes or cylinders.
That's
Oh, kind of a
terrifying.
nightmare. Yeah, kind of a nightmare. Um, this one, I don't know how I felt. In 1955, Walter Morrison invented the Frisbee. When he died in 2010, his family had him cremated and turned into a Frisbee.
Do they still have it?
I hope so.
You gotta hope that they're not throwing it for the dog, and then the dog's like, "Rah, rah, rah."
Yeah, but it wouldn't be the dog's fault at that point.
Well,
But
I'm just saying you don't want you don't want the pooch to eat Papa. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah,
The
I'd like you
pooch
to.
to eat
Oh God, I'm a drink and a half
Papa.
in, and we know how this is gonna go. I'll see ya. I'll see you tomorrow.
I couldn't be happier. Look, I'll just give you one more. Astronaut Buzz Aldrin
Here we go.
admitted that he peed himself while walking on the moon in 1969. More like one small step for man, one giant leak for mankind. Am I right? I literally wrote that joke. I'm very proud of it, but also
It's really
very,
funny.
very embarrassed for myself for having said it out loud. Um, no, what I'm very embarrassed about is the fact that I giggled earlier today, and my husband questioned it, and I went, I wrote a joke, guy, for the show. I was so proud of it in that moment that I was like, I wrote a joke for the show. Now you'll find out. And he's gonna hear this and he's gonna go, my God, that was it. Okay.
Oh, I think that's very clever. You're being too hard on yourself.
Oh God. It's just I've never been happier. I mean, the place I've read it, they were like, God, can you imagine? He was just like sloshing around in his own pee. And I was like, I don't know if there was enough he was sloshing around.
They
But
wear diapers, don't
I
they?
was
Isn't that
like,
a whole
he
thing? Like,
definitely took a leak. And then I was like, one giant leak. Oh my God, there it is. And that just felt like it wrote itself. But the point is, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. I have more, but I'll save it for another time. But
well, be careful because people are going to start wanting this as a weekly thing. I
look,
mean,
I learned so many things that I was like, that's fascinating. And I love little fucking nuggets like that. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
little things where you're like, again, here I go. Can't be stopped. Do you know what the last letter to be added to the English alphabet was? The letter J.
Really?
Yeah. It's like they were like, it already has the sounds everywhere. I guess it's like the Ocean's 11. You think we need one more? You think we need one more. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's like that, but with the alphabet.
It does seem interesting that there's 26 letters. Like, it does feel like it's like, why not make it a cool 25? 25 feels like a more round number.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not meaning to insult all the J names out there, but I don't know how much we did the J.
Well, there is a theory that J names treat people poorly. I mean, I see that on social media
I see
all
it
the time.
constantly.
Yeah.
They're like, you know what man's gonna treat you bad? A man whose name starts with J. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me that that's the thing. I mean, I constantly hear like people badmouth like Brads and Chads and stuff like that, but I don't know where this whole J hate came from.
Yeah. I don't either. I mean, there's something to it. If you were to just look at a picture of Tom Sandoval, just photo only, I feel like I could be like, that guy's got a J name.
Interesting.
It feels odd that his name is Tom. It feels like it should be like Justin or well, I'm also
Jom.
I'm
Were you gonna say Jom? Because I was
Tom.
Tom with a J.
I've never met a Jom.
Me neither. But
Hi, my name
look,
is
guy.
Jom. It's short for pajama.
My son is also named John. Was a
Simpsons.
stretch of a Simpsons. Yeah.
I liked it.
Look, the point is that leak comment was the best thing I'm going to say all day. So this is, it's all down here from there. John.
It's all down here from there.
Yep. What I just proved my own point.
Yeah. And listen, we're all better for it.
Look, if nothing else, we're all a little bit happier than we were discussing a cheater.
You know what? You're right. I feel joyful. I've had a nice little chuckle. I've laughed. I've laughed at John. I've laughed at your hilarious leak joke. I
Thank
say,
so
you know
much.
what? Thank you. You've done a service.
Did you think when we hit record that you were going to hear me say Queen Elizabeth II? I don't think you did.
No, to be honest, even the pineapple comment, like most of this segment, I would say was a damn surprise for me. And I also want to point out, a damn delight.
Well, I mean, it's just the idea that I have another half a page, plus I got really deep into fun names for animal groups. That's for a later time.
Fun names for animal groups?
Yeah, like, I think it's like a pack of wolves, stuff
Sure.
like that, but like specific, oh shit, well, it's too late now.
Like a murder of crows.
Yes. But like it's an army of caterpillars.
Is that true?
Yeah. A
Wow.
flamboyance of flamingos.
That's nice.
That is nice. I mean, there are some where it's like, why did they deserve that? And then there are some where it's like, well, that's just fucking delightful. A horde of hamsters.
Cute.
Yeah. A crash of rhinos.
I
Which
bet.
feels almost hurtful. A troop of monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
See, once you get started on these, it's like, cats? A clouder. A clouder of cats.
No.
What is that even?
Clouder isn't a word.
Correct. I mean, it's too late. We're already getting into these. A mob of meerkats? A cauldron of bats?
Come on.
I mean, a congregation of alligators.
That's church that I don't want to go to.
100%. A cackle of hyenas. A romp of otters. A smack of jellyfish. Yep. This one just feels hurtful. A bloat of hippos.
Oh.
It feels rude. Feels rude. And then I think my absolute favorites are a grumble of pugs.
Stop.
A dazzle of zebras.
Yep.
And an embarrassment of pandas.
Stop. That's real?
It is real.
That's the cutest thing I've heard in my whole damn life.
Yeah. Look, there are so many, and there's a couple that will have like multiple names for it, but like ducks. My favorite one that they get called is a raft.
A raft of ducks?
Raft of ducks. And I'm like, is it because someone saw a bunch of ducks together and they were like, I could use that as a boat?
I could see it. I could see it for sure.
Stone sober.
And it's really killing me. It's killing me softly in the best possible way.
I've lost it.
Yeah. And I'm here for you. I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Thank God.
All right. Listen, let's get into the case. I mean, listen, you've already mentioned that you're stone sober. I assume you're drinking maybe a Slurpee over there?
I absolutely am. Yeah.
Fantastic. I've got a water. I've got High Noon, a lime one right now. Already had a black cherry. And I shouldn't feel as tipsy as I do, but guess what, Buttercup? I do. So that's the kind of episode it's going to be, folks, at home or wherever you're listening to this.
Of course.
This episode is, of course, Unsolved Mysteries, The Severed Head. This is one of the new Unsolved Mysteries episodes. And listen, like we said, not as dark as Dave Grohl cheating, but definitely pretty dark.
Again, I just meant the darkness and the
I
banter,
know.
but,
I'm
but
just
yeah,
teasing you.
it
It
is
just made me chuckle, that's all.
it is amazing to go darkness for us,
Yep.
lighthearted fun facts, darkness for
Yep.
everybody. Like, it
For
does
all,
feel, it feels weird to have done it in that order, but, it's a roller coaster.
isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
Here you go. If you haven't watched yet, I'm gonna get you up to speed right now. In December 2014, a teenager discovered a severed human head in the woods in Pennsylvania. Not only was the victim never identified, but police were never able to figure out how the head got into the woods in the first place. Join us as we deep dive an episode of Unsolved Mysteries from the latest season. What do we know about Jane Doe? What are the theories for how she ended up in the woods? And how often does this kind of thing happen? Well, Christy Oxborrow investigates.
it's also been, recently mentioned, volume 5 of Unsolved Mysteries drops October 2nd.
Oh,
So they're really going for it. They dropped a trailer today. Well, today for recording day. Um, and I don't know. It looks like there's at least one alien one. And I don't know. People were pretty ticked at some of the options they gave in volume 4, so I don't know what volume 5 is going to look like, but
right.
there were so many people who were excited and were like, bring us whatever. But a lot of people were pissed about that Mothman one.
Yeah.
And now they're like, the video looks like it's going to be an alien one, at least in one of them. But I'm like, just give us something juicy. It'll it'll be soon when we can find out exactly what it is, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Disclaimer, as we do, this episode will contain mentions of animal death and suicide, so trigger warning for those who need it. On December 12th, 2014, in Economy, Pennsylvania, a 15-year-old boy named Charles got off the school bus and started walking through the nearby woods when he found a human head. Charles called 911 at 12:40 p.m. and waited on the side of Mason Road. When police arrived, Charles pointed down the embankment. The officers followed that direction, where they discovered the head. Initially, the officers said that it looked like a movie prop. The head was lying on its right side, about 31 feet from Mason Road. The head was on top of leaves and vegetation. There was nothing on top of the head, so they estimated the head had only been there maybe 1 to 4 weeks. There was no sign of decomposition, no sign of damage from any wildlife, and no blood anywhere at the scene. One officer said, quote, "We didn't even know if a crime had been committed." Sir, when you find a head that's been removed from a body, a crime has been committed. The victim may not have been murdered, but the act of decapitating a corpse is still a crime.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe that he's like, "We found a severed head. We didn't even know if there'd been a wrongdoing." It's like, I think there was.
Think yeah, something nefarious has happened,
Yeah.
right?
It's like he was looking for a soundbite and it didn't work out. It
Yeah.
didn't work in his favor. So the head was placed in a cooler and taken to a coroner. It appeared to belong to a Caucasian female with short, curly gray hair. They estimated her age between 60 and 80 years old. There was no way to immediately identify the victim, so she was referred to as Jane Doe. Jane was wearing some makeup, and her hair appeared to have been combed. Jane's tissue was well preserved and in excellent condition. The coroner stated that Jane had been professionally embalmed. Now, before I get into the specifics, trigger warning for those who might be squeamish, because a couple of the words that I'm going to say are a little horrifying.
Okay.
Um, while the skin around the front of the neck was jagged and crude, there were two cuts on the back of the neck that were smooth and like very precise. Those two cuts uh, were likely done so that the cervical spine could be removed.
Jesus.
Yeah. According to an x ray of Jane, her spine had in fact been cut away from the brain and removed. The cuts on the back of her neck are often seen in the case of body brokers, but we're putting a pin in body brokers for now. We're going to get into those ghouls later on.
Okay.
And yeah, I called them ghouls. Um, so forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht, who has performed more than 20,000 autopsies in his career and is most well known for his work on the Jean-Benet Ramsey case, he's brought in to look at photos of Jane. Dr. Wecht said that the decapitation was not done by an amateur. He said, quote, "We see a rather neat surgical dissection. Somebody took their time." Jane's eyelids were closed, and underneath there were plastic caps, which is common during embalming because the caps help keep the uniformity and the shape of the eye. But the thing is, under the caps, Jane's eyeballs were missing, and in their place were two small red rubber balls,
Nope.
like the type of bouncy ball you'd find in one of those quarter machines, or like the type of ball that comes with a set of jacks. And I
Right.
know that I've absolutely dated myself with both of those references, but I just hope that people understand what I'm trying to say as far as those red rubber balls. According to to toxicology, Jane was on two different medications for irregular heart rhythm, and she possibly suffered from chronic pain. The coroner also said that it looked as though paramedics tried to resuscitate Jane at the time of her death. They didn't go further, but I assume that must mean there was maybe evidence of intubation in her throat,
Mm.
but I could be wrong. Jane's head was discovered on a Friday, but since the next day was the last day of hunting season, the investigators waited until the Sunday before searching the area. I'm not an expert, but to me, finding a human head trumps hunting season. I just
I would think so.
cannot believe that they postponed that search for 2 days to placate local hunters. I can't. Um, but when the investigation finally did search the air or investigators finally did search the area, they found nothing. They brought in a cadaver dog, a very good boy named Hank, who was given the scent and then released. Hank immediately walked down the embankment and laid in the exact spot where Jane had been found. According to his handler, Hank is a passive alert dog, meaning he will go to wherever he will go to the scent he's looking for and then lie down as the indicator that he's found what he's looking for. And this is officially my moment where I request to become a passive researcher. So every time I learn something, I will go lie down. I
You're on
guess she wrote two jokes
I was
today.
just gonna say, you're on fire because you're killing it.
Lost my mind. Um, Unfortunately, Hank found no other evidence of Jane anywhere in the area. Police also checked with funeral homes and cemeteries in the area, but nowhere was missing any body parts, so police were at a loss as to where Jane could have come from. But they were determined to find out her true identity. Tissue samples were taken in the hopes of using DNA to identify Jane. However, after 5 or 6 attempts, investigators realized the embalming fluid had deteriorated the DNA to the point where they could not get an accurate sample. Since Jane's eyes were missing, is it possible they were donated after her death and the investigators could use that avenue to try and get an ID? Maybe. But according to the Royal College of Ophthalmologists, following an eye donation, cotton balls are often inserted in the eye sockets to help retain a similar shape. Now, that report I got that from was published in 2008, so it's possible things have changed since then. I really don't think they changed to bouncy balls. Um, and not to gross anyone out with an eye thing, and I say that because I know both Lauren and I have eye things. But quite often in an eye donation situation, they only remove the cornea.
Interesting.
So that's also something to keep in mind. Doesn't necessarily mean that wasn't the situation, but still. Police contacted the manufacturer of those rubber balls. It was a toy company in China. However, the company said there was no way to track the origin of that specific ball because they're generic and they're sold worldwide. So the rubber balls found in the eye sockets were kind of a dead end for helping with identification. And since police were at a loss for how to identify Jane, they decided they'd see if the public could help. They aren't gonna post publicly a photo of a severed head, so they had a forensic artist make a sketch of Jane, but they got no tips from the public after releasing the sketch, so they went back to the forensic artist and had her make a 3D clay model of Jane instead. Unfortunately, that also led to no identification. And then a coroner in Fayette County, which is about 80 miles south of Economy, reached out to say that someone broke into a crypt at a cemetery in Uniontown, pulled out a casket, and stole the head of a woman named Teresa DiCarlo, who had passed away naturally at the age of 75. So, since Fayette County had a body without a head, and Economy Borough had a head without a body, investigators were hopeful that their mystery was about to be solved, especially since Jane had similarities to photos of Teresa. They were both within the same age range. However, Teresa's head was removed in 1988, which is 26 years before Jane was found in the woods. So already it seems incredibly unlikely that someone could preserve a human head that well for nearly 3 decades. And adding to that, Teresa died in 1952, 36 years before her grave was desecrated. And scientifically speaking, I just don't think there is any way her head would have been that well preserved for nearly 40 years
No.
before it was taken. But I understand the idea of following every possible lead, no matter how far fetched. They went to a forensic dentist who told them that based on a chemical analysis of the fillings, Jane clearly had dental work done in the 80s and 90s. There was also a filling compound that wasn't used prior to 2004. And since Teresa died in 1952, that means Jane could not possibly have been Teresa DiCarlo.
Right.
As of this record, Teresa's case remains unsolved. But sticking with the teeth for a moment, two dentists were consulted by investigators, and they said Jane had a considerable amount of work done, including one tooth that had been worked on at least 7 separate times. However, at the time of her death, every single tooth had been filled or fixed. So the dentists, or so the investigators rather, believe that whoever did that work would potentially recognize it if they saw it, but no dentist or dentists have come forward to say, you know, that was my work or I recognize that patient or something along those lines. Police continued to try and find a way to identify Jane Doe. They did an isotope test to help determine the specific area where Jane lived in the months leading up to her death. Basically, they took teeth and hair samples, sent them to a lab, which checked the isotopes in the oxygen molecules because the food and water we consume contains minerals unique to the specific geographic region that we're living in. So if they can figure out what specific isotopes, they can give an area. So police released 3 maps which show the approximate areas where Jane was living prior to her death. The first map was like 0 to 3 months before her death. The second was 4 to 6 months before, and the third was 6 to 12 months prior. And while it slightly narrowed things down, it still left a lot of area because it showed that in the 7 months before her death, Jane potentially spent time in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, northern West Virginia, and eastern Ohio. So it takes a lot of states off the list, but it still leaves quite a large area and didn't help narrow it down enough to get an ID. Now, For those who put a pin in the idea of body brokers, this is your time to shine because now, I mean, now's the moment that people are like, this is what we wanted to hear. Some people are like, please don't tell me because I'm creeped out. And then some people are like, what the fuck is a body broker? And to that, I say, great question.
Yeah.
Simply put, a body broker is someone who sells body parts from cadavers. And look, cadavers play a huge role in medical training, research, and education. Surgeons have said that no computer simulation or mannequin can replicate the emotional experience or tactile response of practicing on human flesh, which is such a creepy thing to say out loud. And I wish I hadn't. But selling organs for transplant is illegal. But there is no federal law that governs against the sale of cadavers or body parts that are used for education and research purposes. According to news organization Reuters, in most states, anyone can legally buy body parts.
No.
In fact, in New York, Oklahoma, Florida, and Virginia are the only states that closely track the donations and sales of body parts. Reuters claims that between 2011 and 2015, private brokers received at least 50,000 bodies and sold more than 182,000 body parts. A full body can sell for anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000, but typically a body broker will dissect the body into 6 parts. So the head, the torso, and then the arms and legs. And for those who aren't familiar with the body parts market, because I mean, I certainly wasn't, just a few examples to give you an idea on pricing. A knee can go for about $250. A spine for $300, a foot for $350, a head for $500, a brain for $600, an elbow or hand for $850, a pelvis with the upper legs attached for $1,500, a torso for $1,000, and a torso with full legs for $3,500.
No.
Who is buying these specific parts? Oh God. Well, I hope it's people involved in the medical or dental fields, if I'm being honest. People who intend to use the parts for educational research type purposes and not just some random weirdo on the internet. But any random weirdo can say, I'm using it for education, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Um, there's also like no one verifies who's buying those body parts or where they're going. So there's that. But we can't mention body brokers without talking about organ trafficking. Um, we've all seen the movies where like a super rich dude needs a kidney, so he just buys one off the black market. And while I'm sure that exact scenario does not happen often, buying organs on the black market is absolutely a thing. Experts estimate the illegal organ transplants is an industry worth 840 million to about 1.7 billion a year worldwide. Trafficked organs account for 10% of the organ transplants that are performed every year. And I assume it's mostly, desperate people trying to save the life of a loved one as opposed to a rich man looking to upgrade his organs. Um, but I just don't think organ trafficking is likely what we're looking at in Jane's case, even though her eyes were missing. I just think if it was just about the organs, her spine wouldn't have been removed.
Mm.
I don't know. Again, while it is illegal to sell organs for transplantation, there are no federal laws against the sale or possession of human remains. So while I was double and triple checking that shocking piece of information, I came across an article on The Atlantic where a mortician said, and I quote, "You might be surprised at how often in my work I am asked whether a mourning family member can keep a dearly departed skull." And that's it. I've gone as deep on the internet as I'd like to. That's it.
And that's it.
That's it. I've hit it.
I've seen things I don't care to.
Reporting for True Crime
Yeah,
Investigations.
exactly. It's like I'm closing up shop.
Yeah,
That's
yep.
oh
Yep. Um, but again, there are no federal laws that prevent a person from owning, buying, or selling human remains. Oh, and the person who's selling the remains doesn't even have to have any sort of special training for handling the remains. Literally anybody can do it. It's a horror show. And if this isn't all horrifying enough, it turns out that a lot of body brokers make deals with funeral home operators so they can just get the supply to keep up with the demand. And I know a lot of bodies come from being donated, but because I'm naturally suspicious, I then am wondering, like, how far does it go with a funeral home? Like, are there funeral homes that claim they're cremating the body and then they secretly sell the body and then give the families fake ashes? Are they secretly removing the bodies from the caskets before they get buried? I I can't, like, this is the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. But I'm just I'm not it could just be that I have a very overactive imagination and I like to write a story. But I can't say it's not happening. Where's the proof it's not? There isn't any.
I think there was like a Dateline year, I want to say 25 years ago, about a scandal that is exactly what you're describing. So unfortunately,
See?
yeah.
I knew again, I knew there had to be something.
Hmm.
I'm not saying I cracked a case. I'm just saying I knew I was onto something.
Yeah.
Oh, God. But some people might be like, Christy, you're overreacting. Body brokers aren't as bad as it sounds. And sure, that might be true for legit firms that deal specifically with medical institutions. But then you hear about things like the time that a Philadelphia doctor got caught sending 12 human heads in the mail in Colorado in 1986. I can't imagine how well those were packed or that they were likely refrigerated in any way. Um, I just also can't imagine 12 heads shoved in a box and being shipped through UPS. Or the time in Chicago in 2013 when 18 severed heads were found at O'Hare Airport. Not to be confused with the time in 2010 when a cargo container full of human heads was found at an airport in Arkansas.
Why?
And I know you're like, what do you mean full of human heads? I mean, there were 40 to 60 human heads, each wrapped in duct tape and stuffed in plastic containers. No refrigeration, no ice, just so much decomposing flesh in a cargo container. I I can't. Um, but before I get too far from talking about human body parts being misused or mistreated, I want to talk about some very specific body brokers. Um, it was hard to narrow it down because just like Never Nudes, there are literally dozens of them.
Oh my God.
That's a little Arrested Development for you.
Thank you.
And even though his character wasn't the one to say it, shout out Tony Hale. My crush on you has begun. So
Just begun.
yeah, I mean, but back in Buster days, I couldn't I
Hey,
couldn't s-
brother.
I couldn't separate him and Buster. Now I've done it. Surgery successful.
Wow, that was chilling.
What?
Now I've done it.
Surgery's been successful. He's gonna be all right. That's more Arrested Development, but I'll stop.
Hmm.
So we're gonna start with Donald Green Sr. and his son, Donald Jr. They ran Biological Resource Center in Chicago. They told a grieving mother that they would donate her son's body to medical colleges and research centers so that, he could help people. Because, it's the right thing to do. Well, they lied and they sold his body for $5,000.
Oh,
In fact, they did this repeatedly and made millions of dollars doing it. And if that isn't bad enough, according to the FBI, between 2008 and 2014, Donald Green Squared sold body parts to medical research facilities for up to $100,000. However, they did so with the knowledge that the parts were infected with hepatitis, sepsis, and HIV.
Oh my God.
And here's the thing, dissecting the bodies and selling or leasing the parts, leasing, um, as a body broker is not illegal. What is illegal is knowingly selling remains that contain infectious diseases. Once they were caught, the Donalds made a plea deal with the FBI, but when a judge heard an emotional letter written by one of the victims' families, the judge threw the deal out. Donald Sr. was charged with wire fraud for knowingly selling diseased donated body parts to medical researchers. In 2021, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison, followed by 3 years probation. Doesn't seem like a lot. Donald Jr. was charged with concealing a crime and given probation.
Mm.
Then we have a man named Arthur Rathburn who bought cadavers which had been donated to science. Then he dismembered the bodies and sold the parts to private companies. When I say dismembered, I mean that Arthur used a reciprocating saw, a band saw, and a chainsaw to cut the bodies up. And if that wasn't unsanitary enough, he also stored human heads by stacking them directly on top of each other without any protective barrier. According to investigators, they found frozen blood and bodily fluids in the bottom of the freezers in Arthur's warehouse in Detroit. After getting fired from a university job in the 80s, Arthur started working as a body broker in 1989. Authorities eventually caught on when they noticed some strange shipments coming into the airport for Arthur. You know, like the time he received a bucket full of human heads from Israel. From the best I can tell, Arthur was never charged in any way for that. But the phrase bucket full of human heads might be the bleakest thing I've ever said on
I
this show.
can't. I can't.
Yeah. Uh, Over the decades, Arthur got sloppy with the body parts he sold. Arthur, along with his wife Elizabeth, sold body parts contaminated with HIV and hepatitis B to a medical conference in Washington in 2012. Of course, they both claimed the parts were healthy, even though there was proof that they knew otherwise. Arthur, who described himself as a visionary ahead of his time, got the parts at a discount because any sort of disease or illness would have meant the parts would be rejected by medical facilities. So he bought the cheaper parts and sold them for more. Investigators found that over the span of 16 years, Arthur sold infected body parts at least 120 times. Investigators said that in that same time frame, Arthur made approximately $13 million.
Wow.
Yeah. Arthur was arrested in 2016 on charges of wire fraud and illegal transportation of hazardous material. Elizabeth took a plea deal in exchange for testifying against her now ex husband. She pleaded guilty to wire fraud and was given 2 years probation. Arthur was sentenced to 9 years in prison, followed by 3 years probation and a fine of like $761,000. Arthur's main supplier, a man named Steve Gore, which is wild to be in the body parts business and your last name is Gore. Steve was given 2 years probation. Investigators said Steve sold more than 20,000 body parts from 5,000 cadavers over the course of 10 years. And then our final tale of body brokering involves a Reuters reporter named Brian Groh, who had a theory that the case of Jane Doe might involve the body broker industry. So, to test his theory, Brian reached out to a Tennessee broker named James Bird. Now, it should be noted that Brian didn't hide anything. He not only used his real name, when communicating with Bird, he also used his work email address. So Bird knew absolutely who he was interacting with. Bird offered to sell Brian 2 human heads for 300 each plus 150 shipping. For the sake of his theory, Brian said yes. Send me the heads. Days later, a nondescript brown cardboard box was delivered to his office. No labels suggesting that box contained human remains, which is unsettling and means that I will now assume every cardboard box I see contains human body parts. Also in the box were pages of medical history, um, which were illegible, x-rays of the parts that were sent, and tag numbers on the parts, which didn't properly match the paperwork he was given. So some mix-ups there. Brian brought the heads to some medical experts who found similar internal cuts to those on the back of Jane's neck. One expert stated that the surgical cuts on Jane Doe appeared as though someone was specifically interested in her cervical spine. But even if Jane came from a body broker, how did she end up in the woods? It's possible that someone was trying to play some sort of sick joke, but it's also possible that whoever was trying to sell her body parts was just completely incompetent. Case in point, in December 2015, a cadaver, a full cadaver, was found on the side of the road in Texas. It had somehow fallen out of a van belonging to a Colorado body broker who hadn't even noticed it was missing.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but it's like, is it possible something similar happened? She was found 30, 31 feet from the road. It was down an embankment. Is it possible the head came from a vehicle
Mm.
and went down that embankment and the person doesn't know because I'll say it again, they were incompetent? Um, so was she dropped and forgotten or left intentionally? Well, according to economy resident John Grabner, the 15-year-old boy who found Jane was the one who put her there in the first place. Do I believe that? Not even a little bit. But for the sake of following every lead, we're going to hear John out. Now, John Grabner was more known as Jay, so I'll just call him Jay. Um, he was a retired railroad engineer who served as an area director for the National Railroad Retirees Association. Jay lived right across the road from where Jane Doe was found, and police discovered Jay had a telescope in his house pointing at the exact spot where she was found. But Jay didn't even wait for the police to come to him. He went directly to them and told them he was skeptical of the teenager's involvement, saying, quote, "It was too conveniently placed. It wanted to be found." Apparently, Jay and the teenager Charles had been friends at some point, despite their age difference. I don't know when they first started hanging out, but at this point, Jay was 64 and Charles was 15. It has such a Back to the Future Doc and Marty vibe because I just cannot fathom how they met or why they hung out. I don't get
Yeah.
the relationship. If it was like a grandparent and grandchild, that's different, but they were not related in any way. So this just makes no sense to me. Um, I also don't know how long they were friends, but according to Jay, at some point they had a falling out. He did not publicly state what happened, but it was bad enough that Jay told Charles he was never to step foot on Jay's property again. So they have a falling out. Some unknown length of time goes by, and Jay discovers that his neighbor's horse, Ginger, has been stabbed. The horse lived on the neighbor's property, but Jay loved that horse like she was his own. Sadly, Ginger died from her injuries a few weeks later. Jay said, quote, "I really loved her a lot. I miss her terribly." Jay believed that Charles killed Ginger due to their falling out, which again, he wouldn't publicly speak about. Charles openly talked about wanting to, or sorry, Jay openly talked about wanting to get revenge on Charles, who again was a teenager. Um, and honestly, maybe blaming Charles is just his way of attempting to get revenge. Uh, but where he thinks a 15-year-old boy is going to get a human head is beyond me. But Jay was convinced it was Charles because Jane was found in the same spot where Ginger was first stabbed. Um, when asked if he would take a polygraph test, Jay said, quote, "Fucking right." Love the passion. So they hook him up to a polygraph. They asked 3 questions. 1, did you place the head in the field? Jay said no. 2, regarding the severed head found across from your house, did you place that there? Again, he said no. 3, did you plan with anyone to place that severed head in the field? He said no. And while we know polygraph tests aren't admissible in court for a multitude of reasons, it's interesting that Jay's results came back as showing deception.
No.
We're talking like 99.9% that he was not telling the truth. Jay said, quote, "I don't care how it makes me look. I'm telling the truth." But where would Jay get a human head? Did he buy one from a body broker with the intention of framing the teenager for the crime? I mean, it feels unlikely. But Jay told the police that sometimes hotels hold medical seminars that involve cadavers, and sometimes body parts just get thrown in the dumpster when the seminars are over, which is horrifying. Um, but I'm not sure how much faith I have in that statement, but it's an interesting thing to tell police. He was also kind of like bragging about it because he was the first one to bring that to the police's attention. There was also a reporter in the area who got involved with this case who was like researching body brokers at the time. And he admitted he had never heard of body parts being just put in dumpsters at hotels after a seminar. So if it is true, it's interesting that Jay would know about it and not the person specifically researching that. It also doesn't help Jay look innocent in any way. But was Jay involved? I mean, what is his motive besides potentially framing a child that he considered to be his nemesis? What were the odds that the teenager would be the first person to come across Jane or that an animal wouldn't intervene first? And just because the kid found her doesn't mean he'd be considered a suspect. There were very, very precise surgical cuts on the back of the neck. A teenager likely would not have had the skill to do something like that. But also, what crime are you hoping to frame the child for? Again, it seems unlikely. Was he simply trying to scare the child to get him back for stabbing the horse? Which, to be clear, there is no evidence anywhere that suggests that kid did anything to that horse. And while it was said that Jay continually inserted himself into the investigation, I don't know if he was guilty so much as maybe just lonely. He was estranged from his wife. He was living with the body of his dog in his freezer. To quote Jay, quote, "She's in there, double bagged and freeze dried."
Why not bury her?
I don't know. I don't know.
Oh
Um,
God.
but this to me sounds more like a man who might just want attention. But I guess at that thought, if he wants attention, what gets you more attention than being the only person who knows anything about a head that's placed in the woods?
Right.
So, it's tough to say which way this goes, but we will not know more, sadly, from Jay because in September 2020, Jay drove to an overpass on the Ohio Turnpike, got out of his vehicle, and jumped in front of an oncoming truck. Jay was 70 at the time of his death. Now, if Jay and Charles weren't involved in Jane being placed in the woods, then what other options are we talking here? Well, in the episode, the police suggested that it was possible that Jane was part of some sort of satanic ritual. I bring us back to Teresa DiCarlo, whose head was stolen from a cemetery in 1988. According to police, about 15 to 20 minutes from that very cemetery was an abandoned building known for parties and satanic rituals in the late 80s and early 90s. And while I'm not saying it's not possible, Jane was found in a completely different place nearly 30 years later. Do I think satanic rituals still happen? I'm sure they do. But while it might be a solid theory in Teresa's case, I just don't feel like there's any evidence pointing to a satanic ritual in Jane's case. That, of course, is just my personal opinion. I am not an expert. And to prove that I'm not an expert, I will admit that while watching this Unsolved Mysteries episode, I spent most of the time saying out loud to myself, often does a head go missing from a body? Unfortunately for all of us, I decided to Google that question.
No.
And honestly, the amount of times it happens is shocking.
It feels impossible.
It feels impossible. Um, but I'm going to give you 8 examples, and that's just a drop in the bucket. Oh my God. I said bucket and my brain immediately went back to bucket full of heads and I was
I
horrified.
can't.
Horrified. Okay. Oh boy. Also, to add to the horror, these are worldwide. I tried to find like widespread ones so we could see that it's just like an international problem. Like it's it's not great. So, example number 1, in 1828, Spanish painter Francisco Goya died from a stroke during a trip to France, and he was then subsequently buried there. In 1899, the Spanish government got permission to rebury Goya in his native country. But when his grave was opened, they discovered that there were 2 bodies in the casket, but only 1 skull. But of course, by this point, the decomposition was so severe, they couldn't tell which head belonged to which body, or which, you knew what I meant.
Yeah.
So they send a telegraph to the Spanish government and explain the situation of we've got 2 bodies, 1 head. The Spanish government responds, quote, "Send Goya with or without head." So they just collected all the remains together and sent them to Spain where they were all buried. Uh,
Oh,
as
how what a lovely way to let them rest, like rest in peace. We're gonna really, shake you around.
Yeah. And I'm also just like, so this happens 1828. How easy was murder in 1828 if they stuck another body in that casket and like nobody noticed? And they only noticed because they dug him up and even then went, nah. It's like, I get you couldn't really do anything about it, but like now, could they do it and try and like, I don't know, try and figure something out? I don't know what you're going to get from a skeleton. Doesn't matter. The point is, I'm horrified. That's what you're supposed to take away from this.
Of
I'm just
course.
horrified. So, uh, again, example number 2, a retired teacher named Cecile LeMay died from cancer in July 2005. Her body was laid out for visitation at a funeral home just south of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. The night before her funeral, someone broke into the funeral home and cut off Cecile's head. The person removed Cecile's earrings and left them in the casket. The culprit also left behind a large amount of cash donations, which mourners had left for the Canadian Cancer Society in Cecile's honor. As of this record, That case has never been solved.
That's a horror show.
Yep. Example 3, F.W. Murnau, who is best known for directing the silent film Nosferatu, died in a car accident in 1931. For whatever reason, someone broke into his crypt and stole his skull in July 2015. As of this record, from the best I can tell, it was never returned. Then we've got in January 2021, 2 men were arrested for removing 4 heads from graves in a cemetery in Florida. Police were able to find the men after tracing the DNA on cigars found in the cemetery. When the men's home was searched, police found the 4 skulls along with 2 replica skulls, a hand, a partial arm, and a few other large bones set up in a shrine. Also on the property was a shed filled with cauldrons that contained bones, feathers, dirt, rocks, turtle shells, animal skulls, which kind of sounds a lot like the Inganya from the Narco Satanist episode. Um, the men said that they had taken the heads for religious practices, and they specifically chose victims um, who had done something heroic.
Jesus.
3 of the victims were war veterans, and the 4th one was a caretaker.
Oh,
The victims all died between 1983 and 1992. The culprits, here we go with horrifying again, referred to cemeteries as both holy places and shopping centers.
no. No.
They were convicted on 4 counts of disturbing the contents of a grave and 4 counts of abuse of a dead human body. One was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 3 years probation, while the other was sentenced to 60 months in prison. Example number 5, a 40-year-old man stole 2 heads from graves in Melbourne's cemetery in January 2022. He also disturbed a 3rd grave, but it was a prepaid plot which did not have any remains in it at the time. The heads were later discovered in the man's house. One was in his bedroom, one was buried in his backyard.
No.
The man was charged with 6 offenses, including exhuming or removing human remains from a place of internment, criminal damage, and 2 counts of removing body parts from a corpse. The man, however, died months later from complications following a double lung transplant.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Example number 6, in August 2022, Sabrina Tavares de Almeida and her mother, Fatima, were shot by an intruder while they were sleeping in their home in Brazil. Fatima survived. Sabrina did not. Sabrina was just 31 at the time of her death. The main suspect of the crime was Sabrina's former brother-in-law, Mateus. Sabrina was married to Mateus's brother, who was a police officer who was killed in 2016. After her husband's death, Sabrina inherited her husband's house, and that apparently really pissed Mateus off. He filed a lawsuit to try and get the house, but he lost. So then he just, next step, start threatening Sabrina's life. When she was murdered soon after, Mateus was arrested, but he was released without charge due to a lack of evidence. Then in March 2023, someone broke into Sabrina's grave, including smashing through concrete, breaking the lid of a coffin, and removing her head. In its place, a bowl full of burned paper, which has to mean something significant, I guess.
Mm.
I think we can all agree on the likely suspect, but as of this record, he has not been charged.
Mm.
Example 7, in May 2024, a security guard at a cemetery in South Africa discovered a grave had been dug up and the corpse's head had been removed. Unfortunately, that is all the information that seems to exist about that story. It's unsettling, but also, again, just pointing out worldwide. We're going all over the place for this happening, and we're going all over the place time-wise. So,
Yeah.
finally, example number 8. In February 1963, A head was discovered in a paper shopping bag in the basement of an abandoned house in Philadelphia. The victim was a Caucasian female between the ages of 50 and 70, so very similar to Jane Doe, not to mention in the same state. Philadelphia is about 326 miles southeast of Economy, where Jane was found. As of this record, Philadelphia Jane Doe has still not been identified. And neither has Jane Doe from Economy in this specific episode. The police working the case did hold a funeral for Jane, which I mean is incredibly lovely. I'm just shocked that no one has come forward after seeing a photo of her and being like, I think I know who she is. Not a single person. That is incredibly depressing to think about. Jane most likely deserved better than that. And I'm going out on a bummer because I'm Christy Oxborrow.
I thought there was going to be one additional bummer, but listen.
I thought I brought enough bummers for
Oh,
today.
yeah. Listen, what a ride. Dear listeners, go hit the can, grab a drink. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back to discuss our thoughts and feelings on the Unsolved Mysteries Severed Head episode of True Crime and Cocktails. Lap 2 on 3. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing Unsolved Mysteries, The Severed Head. Yeah, I mean, listen, lots to talk about here. I think the big thing for me when watching this myself, I was like, wow, it's so interesting that this man out of nowhere was like, he did it. That teen that found the head did it. And then failed a polygraph test and then died. Like, it just felt like it was like such a, you know,
There's
it felt
something there.
something's
Like,
up.
yeah,
Something's up. Something's up. Um, Also, what was the nature of their friendship? Well, and why what was the falling out? Like, these are the details again that it's like, I know that we don't have those answers and we never will now, but just fascinating to me. Um, but yes, okay. The fact that the eyeballs were removed and replaced with like rubber bouncy balls, like what horror show is this? What Saw
yeah,
movie are we in? Like, this is horrifying.
yeah. That's the
Es-
one thing that leads me to like, was it some sort of like a joke, like
right.
to somebody where they were like, I'm going to do this? Like, why rubber balls? But I'm also, and I'm so sorry, but I'm just thinking the spot she was found was very close to where that horse was stabbed.
Right.
So does that mean that section of woods was that the horse owner's property? Was the horse just free roaming somewhere else? Because if it was the property, then I have an even bigger issue with them waiting 2 days because it was hunting season.
Yeah, that's weird.
So there's just so many things that don't make sense. That like they're like, oh, the kid found the head when he got off the school bus. I'm like, and then he called 911 right away, and that was at 12:40. Why was he getting off a school bus at like maybe 12:30?
That's weird.
Right? So see, there's just stuff that I'm like, something
Yeah.
feels like we're missing something that
Well,
they're not
also,
telling
like,
us.
let us not forget, no sign of decomp, no sign of animal damage, no
Yep.
blood. Obviously, no blood if it's been embalmed, but like they say it looked like a movie prop. So this head was being stored somewhere else. Like,
Yeah.
it's interesting to me. Like, it can't have been out in the elements for very long.
I wouldn't think so.
No. So
It
this
wouldn't
is
take long for an animal to get to it.
right. And that's why I feel like I think the taking the 2 days is even more insane because it's like, I'm sorry, guys, but uh you mean to tell me that this isn't a, like, top priority for you? Like, this head hasn't been out in the world. It's not like they found a skull, and the skull, it's like,
Right.
well, who knows how long it's been here, there's no flesh on it, like, you know
Right.
what I mean? Where I guess I could understand the concept of, like, this isn't a, quote, "rush," but, like, to me, it's like, you've just found a completely, perfectly preserved human head.
Mhm.
I think maybe the priority is the head. Like, that's
Yes.
crazy.
Oh yeah. This is a rush to start searching.
Yeah, like, you're already behind.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god. The fact that she had makeup on and combed hair, it feels like she came straight from the funeral home. That's what it feels like to me.
Oh, 100%.
So then you gotta ask, God, is this a case of the body brokers? I don't even like saying body broker if I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I don't love it.
Neither do I,
I don't love it at
but
all.
they don't like it, and by they, I mean the body brokers themselves, so I use it
Oh, okay,
because
great. Good to
just
know.
because they don't.
Yeah. Um, all right. Someone broke into the cemetery, stole the head of Teresa DiCarlo. Then later you were and I wrote this note down twice. Um, because at that point I wrote a note and then you said something else and I was like, well, that pertains back to that first note. So
Hey,
you said that this one medical examiner was talking about how you'd be surprised how many loved ones ask me for, or
yeah,
how many people ask me for their loved ones' skulls.
yep.
There's a program that has recently been released. Maybe we'll talk about it on the show. Christy's never heard me speak of this at this point. Like I'm springing this on her.
Yeah.
It's a 4-episode documentary called Chimp Crazy.
I just saw someone talking about it today.
And
Yeah,
I gotta tell you something. It's the makers of Tiger King.
of course it is.
I consumed this. First of all, it's hard. I don't love the animal stuff's hard for me to watch. And the chimps are heartbreaking for a million reasons.
Yeah.
Any animal is. But the first episode and a half, I was like, ooh, I don't know. Like, this is heavy. Like, I'm just feeling a lot. And then something happens in the second episode where you go, I'm sorry, what now? And then the third episode starts, and then you go, what now? And then I was like, this is the most brilliant show ever made. Um, I think it's as good as Tiger King, if not better. I can't believe I've said it, but there you go.
Wow.
Yeah. So this isn't really a spoiler. It's just skip ahead if you don't want to know absolutely anything. It's just one little detail. But what this made me think of was there is a person in the documentary who is
Mhm.
a keeper of chimps.
I assume. Sure.
Again, skip ahead if you don't want this info. And at one point, he's just talking about, his chimps and whatever. And then he's like, and I have his head. We cut his head off. I have his skull. And it was like his most beloved chimp or whatever that had passed. And then this one person had like, yeah, like I'm assuming done it themselves. And I guess for me, here's what it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
Here's what it is if you gave me a tool and said, "Hey, your beloved animal has passed. Take its head off." I would say put a gun to my head and pull the trigger. Like not for a million,
No.
not for all the money, not for there is no planet on which
Mhm.
I could do that.
Yep.
And the other thing I have to say, I made a TikTok about this too. This is not a spoiler. But there's this through line in this documentary that's fascinating about these women. Now that was of course a man, but there's a bunch of women that are these chimp keepers. I don't know what you call them. And they talk about how there's like no greater connection than what you get with a chimp. But we all know that when chimps mature, when they get to a certain age, they become very dangerous. They're wild, aggressive, can be aggressive animals. Which by the way, again, that's their prerogative. This isn't the chimp's fault. I'm not saying there's anything
Of
negative about the
course.
chimp, but I feel like there's this feeling that these people have where it's like, I'll raise mine different. It's like I was talking at the beginning about you can love that baby all you want. You're still setting it up to fail. You can
Yeah.
love these chimps as hard as you want. It's not going to change the fact that when they become an adult, they could kill you.
They're a wild animal.
They're a
Yeah.
wild animal. Um, and I guess for me, I was just like, what is it? Like, what is that? Like, it's like, I'll be the one that does it different. Like, I'll defy science. Cause I also was just saying in my TikTok, and I stand by it here, like, have you tried a dog? Like, have you tried connecting with a dog? Cause it's pretty awesome. They're pretty
Yeah.
great. And they love you, and you can dress them up, and like they know words, and like they'll wag their tail, and like they're never gonna turn. They're never gonna get to an age where then they're like a 200-pound machine that could, do some damage.
Right.
Anyway, highly recommend. We haven't talked about it. We might not cover it on the show. I mean, I don't know if there's enough to talk about, but it's again, I gotta just say, highly recommend.
Oh,
Um,
there is nothing comforting to me in any way to own the skull of a beloved pet. Like
not don't want it. Don't want that at
there's
all.
nothing that would
No.
like it would just disturb me and upset me constantly. Just to know it's in my home. Like I couldn't handle that. Like, no, thank you.
Listen, I mean, I have Peach's ashes in the house. I have a shrine, and I'm not ashamed
Of
of that.
course.
But yeah, if you said to me like, wouldn't you like to have her head though? Like, no. Like, are you
Yeah.
kidding?
Hmm.
There's something just very and listen, everybody grieves differently. I mean, I'm not trying to pass judgment. I'm saying for me. I think we're saying for us, that's a
Correct.
no thanks.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
certainly not doing it myself. That's
Yeah.
not for
Oh,
me.
yeah. That is
That's
no,
not for me.
no.
No. Anyway, that's what that made me think of. You're gonna love this next note. A doctor was caught sending 12 heads in the mail. Speaking of crooked doctors,
Hmm. Hmm.
have you been keeping up on the Matthew Perry case?
I have not.
So, God bless Keith Morrison, Matthew Perry's
Oh,
stepfather,
yeah.
who, of
Yep.
course, has been like, we need to open this into a case. Like, we need to look into this. I'm paraphrasing and I might be mucking up the details. Don't come for me. I've been drinking. But the point is this. There was, I believe, definitely one, if not two doctors involved in this illegal prescribing, not even prescribing, like illegal sale of ketamine. And there is text messages where a doctor, a medical doctor, said something along the lines, in referring to Matthew Perry, said something about along the lines of, and again, I'm not getting this exact, but it was like, how much do you think the dope or the idiot, he used some term like that, would be willing to pay? These people were who were supplying this man, and certainly, I'm sure, so many others with these drugs, and it led to his death, and I'm sure it's leading to the harm of others. And I just felt
Mm.
so disgusted. Like the idea, again, a doctor that takes that oath to do no harm and then speaking so callously again. I mean, who knows? That doctor could also be sending heads in the mail. How would we know? Anyway,
Mm.
more to come.
At this
Um,
point, you never know.
you never know. And great point. Do you think, I wonder if, I hope that honestly, I hope that postal workers don't know about this, because I don't want them
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
about it, that it's like, how many body parts have I inadvertently handled in a box? Like, I don't want to think about that for them.
Oh, yeah.
Um, this whole detail about like, you can sell body parts, but, or, it's the ones that are diseased that are the problem. This is bleak. What are we doing, humans?
Yeah.
Where's humanity going? What are we doing? You mentioned that one person did some grave robbing and kept it, that one of the heads was found in his bedroom. Where are we going?
Yeah.
What's it go
Nowhere
from
good.
here?
Yeah. Nowhere good. Like this is, I don't know. It's just
I don't
like
know anymore.
so many layers of bleak that I don't, it's,
I'll
yeah, I
say
don't
it.
even know anymore.
It's peak bleak. It's peak
Peak
bleak.
bleak. Peak bleak.
I just don't, yeah, I just don't know where it goes. And I love that here's the joke. I love that this is the episode that broke me. There's so many horrors that we talk about on this podcast routinely, but I just think there's something that is so, look, I've seen the movie Fresh. I talked about it on this podcast before. The Sebastian Stan film. I want to remind you, it's a cautionary tale. When I watch it, I just go, that would be me. I would end up being like, I've met a very handsome doctor in the grocery store. He's amazing. And then of course I end up in a cell somewhere being cut up and sold. Um, but they get into this kind of thing there. That's again a bit of a different story than what we're talking about in this episode. But I guess for me, I thought that doesn't happen. I guess I just wanted to believe it.
Of
I
course.
wanted to believe this is purely fiction. Nothing like
Mm,
this ever happens. I don't want to know. I didn't want to
yeah.
know
Yeah.
that this is something that's happening and I'll say it, I think an alarming pace. I think, because
Oh,
here's the thing.
yeah.
I think more than one in a year is an alarming pace. I don't want to know.
I agree. I agree. I also am gonna say, I mean, you said this is you were surprised that this broke you. I mean, we started this episode uh with a cheating scandal that broke us, so I think we had nowhere to go but down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think, this, I mean, there's notes in here that I don't ever want to revisit. For example, sold body parts with disease, bought cheap parts and sold them for more. Like, these are not ways that I want to refer to human beings.
Correct.
And I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people say, this is just a meat suit. It's just a shell. Like, the thing that makes you a human is the soul inside. I think there's something for me that's just very upsetting about the idea that this person who had value and all of the above is then just being like commodified and cut up and sold into parts. There's something about it that's just very depressing to me in terms
Yeah.
of humanity. I didn't know that this was happening. And I watched this episode, and I know they talked about this in the episode. I blocked it. I blocked it. I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
And then you started talking about it, and I was like, I've heard this before. Oh, right. My brain blocked it, trying
Yeah.
to save me from my own horrors.
Right. I mean, I don't want to, but just know I am reminding you, you're the one that watched this first and
I
went,
know.
this is a good one.
This is a good one, I said.
And then
Yeah.
I watched it, or I just put it on the list and went, great, we'll do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look, none of this is lost on me. I'm out of my mind. I'm not saying I'm well. I'm saying look, I admit it. Like, isn't acceptance like one of the early steps?
Sure. I mean, also in your defense, I didn't have to take it body broker deep, but I did. I didn't have
Oh,
to take
you did.
bucket of heads. I didn't have to go that far. I could have stopped. I could have stopped at Queen Elizabeth II.
No,
but I didn't.
You couldn't. You couldn't. We love you for it.
Yeah.
Okay, the satanic ritual, but there's no sign of it. Yeah, I mean, I feel like again, people just love to paint like maybe it was a cult ritual, and then I was like, what are the chances of that happening? And then in this list of other head deaths or head stealings, then you're like, well, the one that maybe not be that's satanic, but it was definitely some sort of ritual that the cauldrons and whatnot.
Right.
I mean, again, I love that this reporter was like, I'm just going to try and see if I get how easy it is to order a human head. And then what he found out is pretty damn easy.
Yeah.
Easier than I'd like it to be.
Yeah. What I also didn't mention is that was his second transaction with that particular gentleman, because months prior he'd purchased a spine
No.
from him, again, for the sake of his research.
Here's another question. Listen, I'm not here to vilify this reporter. That's not what I'm trying to do.
No, he's doing his job.
What did he do with the parts?
I don't know.
This is the thing. What are you doing with them?
I know for sure he took the heads to a medical expert, and then I have to believe he was like, can you do something with these? Because he's,
Right.
Not going to keep them around. I hope.
Well, according to this other gentleman, apparently they end up in hotel dumpsters. Yeah, I mean, again, like to me, the fact that this man who was at the time how old, in his 50s or in his 60s, Jay,
Yeah.
the fact that he was openly talking about wanting revenge on a child, on a teen boy.
Yeah.
What's going on there? The fact that he failed the polygraph. I mean, what's up, bro? I know that there's a lot of whatever, but to me it's just like it feels very convenient that this adult man who has a obvious public grudge against this teen then decided, I'm not going to wait for the police to come to me. I'm going to call the police and be like, I know where the head came from. That kid put it there. But again, it's like you have nothing but motive to set him up to try and hurt him in some way.
Yeah.
And all of this is to say that if it was Jay, to your point, where did he get the head? And why was that where the brain goes? Hey, I know how I'll get this kid back. I'll somehow procure a human head.
Yeah.
And then I'll throw it in the woods where I know the kid will see it. And then hope he does. Like there was so many pieces of this that would have to be so specific.
Yeah, I have to believe that if that's what happened, that somehow he came upon the head and then was like, I know what I'll do with this.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's also like, but just the kid coming upon the head doesn't mean police will be like, aha, we caught you. So it's like it's not going to do anything. And what are the odds he would find it before an animal comes in and carts it off?
Right.
I mean, maybe the animals were deterred because of the embalming sent to it, maybe. I don't know. But again, what are the odds? Like, unless he knew when the kid was getting off that bus and was like watching the telescope and then like placed it there just before he knew the kid would be there.
What a long
But then
game.
again,
Like
right? But
what a
again, like,
grift. Like,
what is that doing? Why on earth would you do that? And for the love, what happened between the two of you that it went from like, we're going to hang out and I'm kind of like a mentor to you. And all of a sudden it's like, you're never allowed on my property again. I'm going to get revenge on you. It's like, what did he do? I just, I don't get it.
yeah. Yeah. I don't get it either. I mean, what a mystery. What and how sad. The last thing I want to say is just this. Like, whoever Jane Doe was, again, was a human being who was deserving of love and all of the above. And I just think it's so sad to me that this person who I'm sure was loved and was has now just like will never be identified, likely. And was if it was that the head was being used as a weird pawn, like, that's fucking gross.
Uh,
That it's like, this is a human being. This is a human being who again does not deserve to be treated and handled in this way. I just think it's,
correct.
because again, it sounds to me, if the head was embalmed, like, it sounds to me like this was coming from a funeral home. And then I go, were they investigating the funeral homes?
I
Because
mean,
it feels like there was no like I mean, again, I know that we don't know, and I'm sure the police keep things to their chest and whatever, but like, there feels to me like there was a couple of areas of opportunity for investigation that I don't feel like they had kind of suggested that they had done.
yeah. I mean, they said they checked in just to see if they were like missing any parts, but I don't know if they like fully investigated anything. Again, I'm just shocked that not a single person came forward to say, I know who she is. A
Again,
relative, a neighbor.
if the body was embalmed,
Yeah,
unless part of these body brokers are like embalming bodies themselves, which doesn't sound like it's usually a part of the service. But
right,
like, wouldn't someone remember there was makeup on the face? The hair was combed. It feels like this was a body that had been prepared for a funeral. So
right.
can't you, I mean, not to be crass, but like, can't you show a photo to all the local funeral homes and say, hey, do you remember? Can't you send some sort of statewide? Isn't there a way to contact all the funeral homes, even in the state, and say, hey, does anyone remember this person?
Right?
Somebody would have had to have done that work. Somebody would have had to embalm that body. Somebody would have had to put makeup on that face. There has to be somebody that, like, really? Like, I mean, I don't know what kind of turnaround all of these funeral homes are having, but like, I guess to me, I would just think you would remember it, a face, even if you don't remember the name, and then you can get into it.
100%.
But maybe not. These maybe I'm underestimating the amount of bodies and people that are being processed. I don't know. I just feel like, at least in a small town, like, doesn't it make sense to try? I don't know. Maybe they did, but it just felt to me like it was like, that would be my first, if I was a detective, that would be my first suggestion. Is like, it's like, we got to go to the funeral homes and see, does anyone remember working on this body?
100%. Well, as it is, I was thinking the same thing, um, but about the dentists. I was like, is there not a way that they can be like, does this amount of dental work look like just even sending, do your own x-rays of the mouth or whatever and send it for them to compare with what they have? I understand they would have a lot to compare to and all of these sorts of things. But if you're like, there was extensive work someone would remember that. It's like, well, then did you specifically make a try to talk to dentists in the specific area? And I know there were a lot of areas and probably a lot of dentists to talk to, but it's just like,
Here's the thought.
nobody? Yeah.
Here's a thought. So we know that there are very sadly times that people are identified by their dental records, right?
Yes.
Now, in those scenarios, they usually have a suspicion, I feel like, of who the person is, and
I
then
think so.
the dental records confirm it. My question is, we're in 2024, baby. Isn't there time now with
Hmm.
everything being digital? Like, make a database.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why not just upload? And I'm not saying to share for any other reason, but I'm saying, like, make some sort of database within your own private practice. I'm not saying they have got to share the information if people feel like
Sure.
that's violating, but make a database so that then the technology would be that you just send a scan of, like, there's got to be a way for them to x-ray the head so that they can get the x-ray of the teeth. And then
Right?
an algorithm should be able to pull up, like, here are your potential matches. It's like the website that you put a photo in like Google Photo or whatever, like reverse image search. Like,
Sure.
honestly though, right? Like, doesn't it
Yeah.
feel like that would be something that could be helpful in general in identifying Jane and John Doe's?
100%.
And if you go to the area, again, like if you do it like, all right, we're putting a call out to everybody in the state. Please run this.
Yeah.
What's no harm, no foul. Like, all of our medical information has gotta be in databases everywhere anyway, right? Like, I'm sure there are
Sure.
computer systems that have a record somewhere of, like, when we've gone to doctors and whatnot. There would have to be. Even
Oh,
if we
I'm sure of it.
right? So, again, it's like, I don't know that you're violating anybody's rights by, like, keeping a database of dental records for people because then again, this is a time where it's like, it could have been solved, like,
Yeah.
so quickly, in theory.
100%. There has to be something because I mean, God, I get an email every single time I get a prescription that lets me know, "Hey, great news, your online health record's been updated."
Right,
And it's like, "Cool." And then you go through like the the record history of illness and it just gets sad of like you see how many times you were sick or how many
yeah,
prescriptions you got or whatever. But it's like if they have something like that, there's got to be some sort of way to have a to your point, a database where it can just be compared.
right,
And even if it's like I know it's a lot, but every practice has to upload to like a database for their state. And then police can just go to a specific state and be like, even if they don't have control over all of it, they can be like, here's what you need to run
right.
and go to somebody who's in charge of the database.
Right, and the whole point being is that it's like it only exists in these times of catastrophic event.
Yeah.
Like it's not being used to like sell your information or whatever. Like it's just a database that if God forbid something happens
Yeah.
to anybody, then it's like a way to look it up. I mean, I just feel like I understand that also I'm not suggesting that they should have been able to like create that technology in order to solve this one case. Like I get it, but I just feel like in general it would be helpful.
Oh, yeah. There are so many people who go unidentified.
Yeah, I feel
So
like
it,
we talk about this on the show all the time. And listen, there's also people that I'm sure in some cases perhaps have never had dental work, didn't have access or what have you. I'm not saying it's foolproof. I just feel like in this case where we know this person had very specific dental work done,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, it just makes sense. I mean, throwing it back,
Please.
thinking back to, the very first season, first few episodes we did the one about I love that I can't remember because I didn't think of this in advance, the body in the hotel in Europe that everyone was like, "She might be a spy."
Right.
There was this very unique dental work done there, and it's like,
Right.
again, if that could be a way where it's just like, it doesn't even have to have your address. It's just your name. Yeah, I don't know, maybe date of birth. And then it's like, here you go.
Yeah.
And then they had at least have a name to go by
Right.
in case they need to use it. It's one of those
Well,
in case of emergency, break glass situation. You know
100%.
what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, well, I hope somehow that this gets solved eventually and they're able to put a name to the face. In the meantime, Christy Oxborrow, fantastic work as always, not only on this case, but on the list of fun facts. I don't want you to think that I thought it was a bad idea. I thought it was the greatest thing you've ever done.
Oh, bless you. I didn't think you thought it was bad. Um, again, it just goes to show how much we knew that our how much that Dave Grohl news affected us, where my instinct was, "Oh, man, everybody's gonna be down about this. We should bring them up. We should do something," like, such a mother that I was like, "Oh, that's gonna make people sad. What would make them happier? Let's look up silly names for animal groups."
I mean, there's so many things. So
Yeah,
many things. Listen, you killed it as always, and I'm not talking in the murder sense. I've
thank
been
you so
having
much.
some drinks. Please just don't come for me. And we thank you, dear listeners, for joining us for this romp. If you haven't already, give us a follow on the socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails, on Twitter at Not Detectives. And of course, if you'd like some bonus content, a little bit more, would you like some? Well, why don't you come over to patreon.com/, True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about our subscription-based service over there. Lots of fun stuff, lots of bonus episodes. Check it out if you're interested. And the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is, of course, truecrewmerch.com. So check that out as well if you're interested. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
I do, and I also wanna point out that you are the cutest human alive. Just
God
know.
bless.
Just know.
Thank you so much.
Um, on the next True Crime and Cocktails, Christine Demeter.
Don't know anything about this case. Can't wait to find out. This, of course, is our August patrons poll pick. Over on Patreon, we offer a poll every month where you can choose one of the cases we cover on the main feed here of the show. So again, check that out if you're interested. Christy, do you want to say goodnight to the people?
Good night to a grumble of pugs.
Good night, Buzz Aldrin. One small step for man, one giant leak for mankind.
My best work.